Hey guys, what's up? My name is Katie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in February for the Booktube Games, and I totally thought that I had failed the Booktube Games, but looking back at the list of books that I read for this wrap up, I actually did a pretty good job, and I have to owe a lot of that to audiobooks. I read 10 books total in February and 7 of them were audiobooks, which is a lot, but it definitely helped me in the Booktube Games. And I really enjoyed all the audiobooks that I read, and February was just really crazy for me in terms of work and stuff, so I actually did not have a lot of time to physically read, despite it being the Booktube Games. So I think that they definitely helped me out in getting some points for Team Ketterdam. So to start out, the first book that I read in February was Sadie by Courtney Summers, and this was on audio. When Sadie's younger sister Maddie is brutally murdered, her whole life completely crumbles around her. When the police investigation is botched, Sadie decides to take her mission for revenge into her own hands, and so Sadie vanishes. Wes McCrae, an emerging radio personality, overhears Sadie's story at a gas station and becomes completely obsessed with the case. He starts a podcast to document Sadie's case and to try and find the missing girl. And this book is told both from Sadie's perspective and in the form of these podcast episodes by Wes McCrae. So I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. It is probably the best audiobook that I have ever read in my life. I am of the mind that this is a book that was meant to be an audiobook, and I think if you were thinking about reading it, definitely please pick up the audiobook. And I think that half the book is told in podcast form is why it is so successful as an audiobook, and also the fact that Sadie has a stutter, and I think really hearing the stutter and how she tries to overcome it is just really powerful. I think you get the full effect of her speech impediment when you are listening to it rather than reading about it. Again, this book has a lot of triggers for sexual abuse, violence, and pedophilia. It is not an easy read. It's a very harrowing read, but if you can handle that dark subject material, I definitely recommend checking it out because it is very powerful. I mean, this book was just completely heart-stopping at times, and I really thought that there was a very perfect pacing in this mystery between Sadie's perspective and the perspective of the podcast. The podcast was always a few steps behind Sadie, so we're hearing about what happened from Sadie's perspective, and then we get kind of the broader perspective of the people in Sadie's lives and the police reports and all that kind of stuff following, you know, behind Sadie's footsteps. And I think it just gives a wider perspective of the consequences of Sadie's actions, and it was just so good, and the ending just left me speechless. I think this is a very powerful and impactful book. Next up, I listened to Sahil Girls by Claire Legrand on audio, and this was the Team Ketterdam book for the Booktube Games. The little tagline that I think sets the tone of the book pretty perfectly is, "Beware of the woods and the dark dank deep, they'll follow you home and won't let you sleep." There are 3 Sahil girls: New Girl Marion, Pariah Zoe, and Queen Bee Val. Their stories converge together on Sahil Rock, where girls have been disappearing for decades and no one has done anything about it until now. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. It was definitely really creepy and spooky, and I think I maybe would have enjoyed it more had I read it around Halloween time. This book does involve some magical realism. I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a more magical realism book or a straightforward mystery going forward, and I had been listening to a lot of mysteries that were like set in the real world, and then I think this magical realism kind of just like didn't do it for me because it kind of didn't have any sort of explanation rooted in reality because it is magical realism. So I just thought that in comparison to mysteries that are and thrillers that are more based in reality, it just wasn't as scary because it wasn't something that I like know is real. Whereas reading about something like in Sadie, where you know that that kind of stuff actually happens, is just to me a lot scarier. I did like the characters, and I really liked the relationship in this book. All 3 of the main characters were queer in some way, and I thought that that was really fantastic representation. There were some feminist passages in this book, and I am like a feminist and I believe in that, but it just felt so heavy-handed and it was very like tell, don't show. So I didn't think it was a very effective discussion of feminism. I thought that it was lacking a little bit in the nuances and depths of feminism that books normally in the YA category like normally reach to. So it just wasn't very intricate, and I felt like it was kind of thrown in the latter part of the book, and I just don't think it was like the most well done example of feminism in literature that there could be versus like something like Female of the Species, which is like just fantastic feminist commentary. So yeah, overall I liked this book. It just wasn't, you know, perfectly for me, but I did enjoy it. And I mean, Fury Born by Claire Legrand is one of my favorite books of 2018, so I was a little disappointed in this, but it's kind of a different genre. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that book. And the first physical book that I read in February is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. I was so excited to get this book. And I went to a Lorde signing, so as you can see, it is signed to me, and this book is just so pretty. I mean, even look at it without the cover, it's just so beautiful. Grisha trilogy really just has like such beautifully designed books. And as you can see, I have many tabs because I love this book so freaking much. So in order to read King of Scars, this is the Nikolai duology, and I would say that you have to read the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology before reading this because this follows characters from both. We are following Nikolai, Zoya, and Nina from the Grisha universe. After the Ravkan Civil War, Nikolai is trying to piece together the fragmented factions of his country that has been ravaged by war. However, Nikolai is dealing with his own consequences from the ending of the war, and he must journey to the dark heart of Ravka to uncover the secrets of the powerful magic within him. Enemies are gathering at the weakened borders, and the Grisha army faces threats from all directions. Meanwhile, in the north, Nina wages her own kind of war against the Virgins, who are extremely prejudiced against Grisha, and is burdened by grief and her terrifying power. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. So freaking fantastic. I love the Grisha verse. Leigh Bardugo is a queen. This book just killed me in the best way possible, and I think the reason I loved it so much is because I absolutely adore all of these characters. The character that definitely stole the show for me in this book is Zoya. I love Zoya. When she was first introduced in the Grisha trilogy, I didn't really like her that much, and then over time she's just grown to be a character that I adore even more because she's such like, she's so fierce and brutal and unyielding, and she's unapologetic about who she is. There's a lot of passages in this book where someone is explaining like, oh, men think that they can like charm me and that underneath my icy exterior I'm actually this sweet girl, but like I'm not, like this is who I am, and I just like love those passages so much. And she just is the general, and she knows who she is, and she is unafraid to be it. But yet in this book, we get to delve a little bit more into her backstory, and we get to see some vulnerable sides of her character, which I always love exploring. The witty banter between her and Nikolai killed me. I love their witty banter. These characters just play off of each other so well, and we don't really see them interacting a lot in the Grisha trilogy. Really, their friendship started after the Grisha trilogy, so it's really like a fun new element. And like Nikolai is just so like, has all these wild ideas, is like an adventurer and like all this stuff, and Zoya is just like so like straightforward and like icy, and like they just play off of each other so well. I love Nikolai, and I loved seeing him struggle with the things that he's struggling with after the Ravkan Civil War, and I really think exploring a country that is on the mend after a giant war like that is really interesting, because usually in books the war is over and like that's the end of the series. So it's cool to kind of follow these other characters in the struggles that take place not necessarily when a war is going on, but in trying to recover from that war. And Nina, she's still a queen as always. She's confident, funny, and willing to fight for what she believes in. I adore her endlessly, and I love the introduction of the character Han, who is virgin, into Nina's storyline, and I think that they have a really interesting friendship. And I can't wait for the second book in this duology to explore more of that, because I think that that is heading in a very different direction. The Nikolai storyline and the Nina storyline are pretty separate, but I found that I was equally looking forward to finding out what was going on in each of the storylines. As always, the world building for the Grishaverse is superb. Leigh Bardugo is a queen at world building, and I just loved the amount of insight that we got into Grisha lore and how these powers work. I think that it was really kind of a deep dive and very, very interesting. And I was completely spoiled for the end of this book on Twitter. Thank you, people, for not putting spoiler warnings. I'm a little mad about it. However, even though I completely knew what the ending was going to be, I was still shocked and like left speechless by the last line in this book. I just love when like the last line in a book is like such a sucker punch and you're like, oh my god. It's crazy, amazing, and fun, and I love everything Grisha. I adore it. It's amazing. 5 out of 5 stars. Next, on audio, I listened to Catwoman. Oh no. I listened to Catwoman Soul Stealer by Sarah J. Maas. The tagline for this book is, "When the bat's away, the cat will play," and on the back it says, "It's time to see how many lives this cat really has." And I think that those taglines just capture like the fierce, sassy nature of this book. Catwoman Soul Stealer is the origin story of Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman. 2 years after escaping the slums of Gotham City, Selina Kyle is back as the mysterious socialite Holly Vanderhees. Batman is away on a vital mission, and so Batwing must prove himself by keeping the city safe. He's in hot pursuit of Catwoman, who is slinking through Gotham City at night and creating chaos. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I was really surprised. I didn't think it was going to be a 5-star read, but it totally was. Like, Sarah J Maas, I just love everything that she writes. I don't think I've given her any of her books less than a 5 stars because I'm Sarah J Maas trash. The audiobook was fantastic, and I think the narrator just such a good job of like capturing like the sultry, slinky way of Selena Kyle and like how she speaks, and like it's so good. I am a massive fan of superheroes, but I will say you don't really need to know anything about superheroes going into this. If you are a fan of DC, then you will get a lot of the references, but it's explained enough that you don't really need to know anything going into it, and you can just have fun with it. Selena Kyle is really just a fantastic anti-hero. Her character is like this badass and has such questionable motives, and her and Batwing playing this game of cat and mouse, playing off of one another, it's just so fun. I think that superhero novels in particular can feel a little cheesy and forced sometimes because they are based on this giant comic franchise, but I just had a lot of fun with this novel. I thought it was really well written and paced fantastically, and it was like within the confines of like having these vigilante heroes very believable, and I can't believe I doubted Sarah J Maas for a second because anything that she writes, I'll probably love. Next, I listened to Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes, which is the first book in the Fallen Kingdoms series. Magic that has been lost for centuries is slowly awakening in the land of Mythica. Rulers grapple for power and rebel forces arise. We have 4 main players. Princess Cleo, a pampered princess her whole life, lived in luxury. Jonas, a peasant enraged by injustices to his family that finds himself at the head of a rebel force. Lucia, adopted into the royal family with a prophecy surrounding her destiny. And Magnus, heir to the Blood King and raised to aggression, who realizes that the heart may be more lethal than the sword. I ended up giving this first book 4 out of 5 stars. It is definitely a solid start to a YA high fantasy series. There are 6 books total in the series. We get multiple perspectives, so we get to see all of the conflicts between the different nations, and it definitely set up the world for further conflict and strife. I was really intrigued by the characters, and I think there's a lot of room to further develop them. And it was interesting to read about a character in their voice and how they like see their world, and then see them from a different character's perspective to see like how they viewed each other. And this was the first fantasy book that I read on audio. I thought that I would be really confused, but it actually, once I kind of got settled into the world and the lingo, it was a really fun read. The narrator was fantastic. It does such good like accents for everyone. It was read in a British accent, and I just like loved listening to it. All this crazy stuff happened. A lot of people like kind of say it's like a YA Game of Thrones type book, and I totally agree with that assessment. I mean, maybe less gory and stuff than Game of Thrones because it is YA, but like some unexpected stuff really happens, and the author takes these turns that you didn't think was gonna happen, and then it did, and then you're like, oh my god. So yes, definitely a really enjoyable start to a series. Next, I listened to Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. Ellery and her twin brother Ezra are sent to small town Echo Ridge to live with the grandmother they barely know after their mother's latest stint in rehab. And Echo Ridge is hiding its fair share of secrets. Years ago, Ellery's aunt went missing, and 5 years ago, the homecoming queen wound up dead. Now there are threatening messages all over town, and another girl goes missing. And the whole town is asking the same question. Why do the young and popular girls continue to disappear? I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I thought that the plot was super twisty-turvy, and I did not see a lot of the stuff coming. Each of the characters had so many secrets that they were hiding, and they were all layered on top of one another, and this book took some unexpected turns. And I listened to this book in like a day and a half because I just needed to know what was going to happen, because I was so hooked on the mystery and needing to know the outcome of it. I also liked that this book talked a little bit about its characters like trying to solve the mystery but not being very good at being true crime aficionados, and I think that's very realistic because teenagers like are not like Scooby-Doo and gang. Like, I don't think teenagers nowadays would really be able to solve all of their own mysteries all the time, which happens in these novels. So I thought that that was a really interesting aspect. I think it really takes the reader through a twist and a turn that way because the narrator is kind of unreliable. And next on audio, I listened to Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. Alosa is the daughter of the Pirate King, and she is sent on a secret mission to retrieve a map fragment leading to a paradise full of treasures. To do this, she must infiltrate her enemy's ship. The only thing standing in her way? The unexpectedly clever and handsome first mate Raiden. But Alosa has some tricks up her sleeve and will stop at nothing to get what she came for. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was just like the swashbuckling pirate adventure of my dreams. I love pirates. If you are a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean and female-led novels, you will absolutely adore this book, just like I did. Alosa was such a strong main character. and I liked how ruthless and fearless she was in being a pirate. And I love the romance in this book. The witty banter was like on point. It made me swoon at times, and they were just like playing off of each other the whole time, the two main love interests, and I just thought it was so well done. And the pirate accents in the audiobook, also great, really set the mood and set the tone for the whole pirate theme. And I just like loved hearing about like the pirate adventures, going to get the treasure, and like all these islands and the ships, and like, so good. Next up, I read Nevernight by J. Kristoff, which is now probably one of my new all-time favorite books ever. Like, I love this book so much. So much. I can't believe how much I love this book, and this was a buddy read with Madison over at Princess of Paperback, and we both just love this book so much. Mia Corvair is the daughter of an executed traitor in a land where the three suns almost never set. She becomes an apprentice in the Red Church, a school for the deadliest assassin, and is bent on exacting vengeance on those that murdered her family. Obviously, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars because it is just a masterpiece. Like, I cannot express how much I freaking love this book. I just like don't think I can like fully express all the love that I have for this book. And like, I know when I read God's Grave, I'm also going to be like shook to the max. Like, it was just so fantastic. This book has everything that I've ever wanted in an adult fantasy. We follow a woman main character who is ruthless. We have the gore, the sex, the suspense, shadow cats, stabbing, you name it, it has it. This book is unflinching and brutal and absolutely amazing. I've always seen people talking about the footnotes, and I think it actually was a very interesting stylistic choice that added a lot to the book. It is completely unique, and you really do not see that in any other fantasy book ever, and I think it really sets this book apart from a lot of others, and you get so much world building through reading the footnotes, and a lot of times they're hilarious. They have this omniscient, I do not know how to say this word, but like, you know, the all-knowing third person narrator, and you kind of get this like narrator's voice, whoever this like mysterious narrator is, through these footnotes, and I just think it adds a lot of humor, a lot of dark humor to this book. This world has like so much world building, it's crazy. Like, the whole system is different. J. Kristoff has posted on Twitter, there's like a whole freaking, he worked with an astrophysicist to figure out like the logistics of the solar system and how you can have 3 suns and almost never have it be night. Like, that is just some in-depth research there and some crazy world building. Besides that, there were a lot of other structural choices that were really interesting, including the parallelism in the first chapter. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. And like the text patterns of when the shadow cat or the shadow creatures are talking, and like the flashbacks versus the present day, and it's just a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. I love it so freaking much. The last physical book that I read this month is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nagan. Each year, 8 beautiful girls are chosen as paper girls to join the king's harem. But one year, a 9th girl is chosen, and she is made of fire. Lay lives in a remote village with her father when the snatching of her mother by the king's forces still haunts her family. When the guard comes for Lay, she's not content to sit idly by, and she does the unthinkable. She falls in love. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I thought the world building was completely captivating. The whole system of beings and magic and the palace setting was really awesome, and I thought that it was great to see an Asian inspired fantasy because I think that Asian cultures are so rich, and it's really cool to see a fantasy drawn from those cultures instead of a lot of the European like medieval cultures that traditional high fantasy is drawn from. The situation that the paper girl's in is actually like really horrifying and harrowing, and there are definite trigger warnings for violence and sexual assault. However, if you are okay with that kind of dark content, it is really empowering to see the paper girls supporting each other like through their shared trauma and seeing how they can kind of overcome that struggle to rebel against this horrific situation. And of course, the romance in this book is a female-female romance, and it was just so adorable and cute, and like I just love them together, and I'm so excited for the second book. And we just got a title announcement, and it is going to be called Girls of Storm and Shadow, which just sounds like the most incredible name ever, and I cannot wait for the cover to be revealed, and I'm just so excited. And last but not least, I listened to Rebel Spring by Morgan Rhodes on audio, which is the second book in the Fallen Kingdom series. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. And this is the book in the series when I started to get a better feel for the characters and I started to get a little bit more attached to them. We get to delve more into the political atmosphere of the time and of these different warring countries. And we get more of the backstory of the lore and legend of the world. And the ending was so explosive and crazy, I picked up the next book on audio immediately, but that was in March. So you'll hear about that in my March wrap up. All right, so those are all of the books that I read read for the Booktube Games. Let me know down below what was your favorite book that you read, and have some fun, read some books, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.